Hi there, my name is Riley J. Dennis, and I use she, her, or they, them pronouns. If you're a part of the LGBT plus community or just have an interest in social justice, you probably know what I mean by that. However, if you're outside of those worlds, it might seem a little confusing to you. Why am I telling you my pronouns? Can't you tell just from looking at me what pronouns you should use for me? Well, not exactly. The thing is, if you want to be inclusive of LGBT plus people, it's important to know that for many of us, our appearance doesn't say everything you need to know about our gender or our pronouns. I know that if you've never encountered any of this before, this can sound daunting, but I promise it's actually really simple. If someone tells you what pronouns to use for them, it's polite and compassionate to use them, because it could mean a lot to them. If you don't know what pronouns someone else uses, it's polite to ask. And you can help other LGBT plus people feel more comfortable by introducing yourself with your pronouns and not being offended if someone asks you what your pronouns are. They're just trying to be polite. So, for example, if you're a cis man, your pronouns are he, him. If you're a cis woman, your pronouns are she, her. Likewise, trans men often go by he, him, and trans women often go by she, her. But there are also non-binary people who may not use either of those options. There are several different pronouns they might use, but the most common is they, them. So for example, instead of saying she went to the store to get some cookies for her friend, you would say they went to the store to get some cookies for their friend. Using they as a singular gender-neutral pronoun is actually widely accepted and grammatically correct. Both the AP and Chicago style guides recommend using whatever pronoun a person asks you to use for them, and that includes singular they. In fact, in that last sentence, I used the singular them to refer to one person, and it probably sounded perfectly natural to you. That's because singular gender-neutral they is already commonly in use to refer to singular pronouns like everyone or anybody or family. And it's also commonly in use to refer to a singular person whose gender you don't know yet. For example, in the sentence, everyone is here, the everyone is singular. It's not everyone are here, but when you refer back to everyone, you have to use they. So the sentence becomes, everyone is here, but are they ready? In this instance, they is referring to a singular pronoun, even though it's referencing multiple people. Native English speakers say stuff like this all the time. Singular they, used in this way, isn't new or abnormal. In fact, it's been used by Shakespeare, Charles Dickens, George Bernard Shaw, Jane Austen, and tons of other authors. The other common usage of singular they is when you don't yet know someone's gender. For example, listen to these sentences. Somebody fell in the parking lot earlier today. I hope they're okay. I'm getting a call from someone, but I don't know who they are. I heard that a teacher spent their own money on school supplies. When I meet someone new, I give them a high five. All of those sentences used the singular they or their or them. You can also use themself. In fact, Emily Dickinson used themself in 1881, and F. Scott Fitzgerald used themself in 1915, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary. The Merriam-Webster also says that themself instead of themselves has been around since the late 1300s. It's not a new thing invented by trans people or millennials. It actually has a long history in the English language. The alternative to singular they in this instance is he or she, which some people do say, but it's just astoundingly awkward and long-winded to have to use two pronouns every time. Singular they does a lot to simplify this, and it leaves room for non-binary people who don't use he or she pronouns. Which leads me to the more modern usage of singular they, when you're talking about one person whose gender you already know. Traditionally, if you know someone's gender, you refer to them as either he or she. Because of that, singular they for someone whose gender you already know can sometimes sound clunky to people, but it's rapidly increasing in usage and more people are using they them pronouns for themselves. Here are a few examples of how you could use they them pronouns for a non-binary person. That's my friend Alex. They are really excited to meet you. Oh, I think Sam left their phone here. Taylor made dinner all by themselves. My cousin is on the 4th floor. Just give this to them. As you can see in the first sentence, you still generally say they are instead of they is, even though they is singular. If this is confusing to you, just remember that when you say you are to one person, it's also singular. Sometimes are is a verb you use for one person. Using singular they like this may take some getting used to, but if you put in just the smallest amount of effort, it becomes as natural as saying he or she. Even though singular gender-neutral they has a long history, this usage is relatively new. But the fact that our language is changing in this way is not new at all. Language changes constantly, and in fact, hundreds of years ago, the English language took a plural form of a pronoun and turned it into a singular. If you're not sure what pronoun I'm talking about, let me explain. You see, when we speak in the second person, we usually use you for the singular. Actually, we don't really have a great second person plural. Lots of people say you guys or you all, and some people say y'all or yous, but it's generally agreed upon that you is for one person and sometimes multiple people. Except go back a few hundred years and you was only plural or formal. Thou was the familiar singular form. If you've ever studied French, it's like the difference between tu for familiar singular and vous for formal plural. Only in English, we dropped thou completely and started using you as a singular. So we've actually already taken a word that was almost exclusively plural and turned it into an almost exclusively singular word. And I don't run into many language purists who are still walking around using thou nowadays. This is a change that's already happened. You can't stop people from using singular they, and it's only going to become more common.